And once again, I am privileged to introduce the founder of the Temple of Universality and the person around which this metaphysical magic seems to have hung itself. And she has the most extraordinary, Reverend Betty Tatalajski has the most extraordinary book that we're going to talk about today. She gave it to me last Wednesday in the morning, a week ago, and said that she wanted to talk about it during our program. And by the afternoon, I had finished it. And it was extraordinary. So, without further ado, Reverend Betty Tatalajski, founder of the Temple of Universality here in Tucson, Arizona.
Hello, friends. It's always good to be with you. And this little book that we're talking about, you can read it easily in an hour, except that you will want to peruse it and spend some time in it. Now, it's about a man who is a doctor, he's a surgeon, he's a psychiatrist. And this little book was perused by Dr. Moody, and he recommends it. So do we. We would love for everybody to have a copy of this little book, Return from Tomorrow. It's lovely, it's true, and we really appreciate the great man who wrote it. He didn't want to. That wasn't his style. It wasn't his belief system that you could speak with the dead, that you could die and come back. But OBEs, or out-of-body experiences, are pretty well accepted now.
Now, in 2014.
Yeah, many years later.
He had his in 1943.
In 1943. And it's a story about Dr. George Ritchie. It's, you know, it's nothing new to us.
At the temple.
At the temple. Because
a hotbed of errant thought.
Because we speak to those on the other side
yeah.
all the time. You can too. But perhaps you would rather have your little, what do you call, computer, you know, your little handheld phone and make your calls electronically like that. Well, there are a lot of us that don't need them because we're talking to people across distance. It's all energy. We live and move and have our being in a world of we call the cosmos. But the cosmos is energy / spirit. There is no difference. Spirit is energy. Energy is spirit. Now we know that this energy goes from telephone pole to pole, that it goes from those discs in the sky all over the world. But you can also sit quietly, clear your mind, and talk to anybody, anywhere. Not only the ones here on the earth plane, but anyone who has ever lived, because of energy, spirit, and the way the cosmology of the world is created. Now, some of you have had experiences like this we call coincidences. I think I will call my Aunt Frances. I haven't talked to her for a while. And you go over to the phone and it rings as you start to pick it up, which has happened to me several times this week. Oh, just getting ready to dial you.
Yeah, you've heard that statement. Oh, I was thinking of you.
Oh, this week.
This is a common, yeah, I thought about you and you called.
And you called.
And I would say to them, see, you should have been thinking about God. Look what happened then.
Yeah.
Instead, you just ended up with me.
We just have a simple reason for it. It's called coincidence. Now, as a metaphysician, which everybody is or will be in this new era that we call the Aquarian electronic age, we will discover this. And when we sit in our meditation and we are receiving messages from the other side, that's a little example of how it works. Again, we think coincidence. There are no coincidences. There are no accidents. And our spirit teachers, those from the spirit world, tell us if there ever was such thing as a coincidence, all of creation would implode. Everything works under cosmic law, according to spirit, energy, and so it is lovely to be able to communicate with those unseen people that we thought died. But when you really understand that we are spirit, spirit is energy, it cannot die.
Well, Betty, you know, that's why this story is so extraordinary.
It's extraordinary because it happened in 1943.
Yeah, and the person who it happened to, it was amazing because you gave me this book, and I read the story, and it's so compelling.
It's compelling,
all right?
And you're finished in an hour.
In an hour. And so I went back, and in fact, I just looked at it to see when this book was published. It was published in 1978.
Yes.
35 years after the experience happened to him. And from his story, the way he tells it, he's a doctor, he's a psychiatrist, and previously a surgeon.
A surgeon.
And he tells this amazing story under sort of duress. All right, that he had a guy come to him.
Yes, because he wanted to relieve the man of his
suffering
and pain.
Yes.
His bodily pain was horrible with
Yes.
cancer all over.
Yeah.
But it was his mind
he was so bitter, so
bitter.
angry that he said that he had first met this man 6 months before. The guy had come to him, you know, and in his practice as a psychiatrist. He's a psychiatrist in Virginia. And he'd been working with him, and the guy was, you know, he was making progress. Well, progress or not, they had formed a friendship. They liked each other, all right? He said, well, when this guy came into his office this day, he was quite different.
Well,
he was angry.
He didn't like anybody.
Oh, he was really mad at this time.
He didn't like anybody or anything.
He had just gotten a prognosis from the doctors that he had 6 months to live. That was it. All right? And he was angry. And so here's the psychiatrist. What is his name? George?
Ritchie.
Ritchie. And Dr. Ritchie sitting there listening to this person who he has a relationship with just go off in anger. And he said some things that were sort of hopeful. And the guy just took it and was so bitter. And he looked at him. Yeah, he said, I thought better of you.
I thought, you know, I could go to an old any preacher
and hear that crap.
Hear that crap. Yeah.
But I didn't expect it from you.
No.
All right? And he said, how can you say things like that? Well, that was Dr. Ritchie's cue to go into and tell a part of his story.
He did not want to do it.
That he didn't tell anybody. His wife knew, a few people knew, but because he had this relationship with this man who was in extreme anger, under pressure.
And gonna die.
There was nothing to lose. So he said, well, let me tell you why I can say what I told you today.
Yeah.
And that's when he said he started writing this story for the rest of us. It was about an event that had happened to him before.
It's no longer than an essay.
It is. And the story is so compelling that once you start reading it, you're swept up because you know it's absolutely authentic. And it is so revelatory and so beautifully revealed, even though it goes against everything that you believe about reality, everything that you believe is possible or impossible, because it's so different than the reality that you accept as real and set in stone, that when you read this man's story, you know it's true. That either he's lying and he isn't, because that's what happens. When you're confronted with the unusual and the extraordinary, and Betty,
you have no place for it.
Yeah, well, Betty, that's what I have to say to you. All right? I met Betty Tatalajski in 2008, maybe 7. You know, I see her at the temple when the psychic, you know, Hoyt Robinette was there. And I've been through a lot of stuff in my life. I mean, I went through the Haight-Ashbury. I saw things. I took acid. I've talked to God. I've had experiences that are extraordinary that have made a believer out of me. Okay, that's what's possible. And when I ran into you, and she starts telling me what has happened to her since 1979, when she was in Tucson and she was in PR, and was asked to go write a little article on this spiritualist church in Tucson, and around 30, 25 people would go, and they talked to spirits and stuff like that. So she goes down there figuring this is a slam dunk, all right? That, she walks in there, and it changed her life.
Spiritually never left.
Never left. Changed her life. And what happened to her was so profound after that I later told Betty, I said, Betty, I said, when I read Paramahansa Yogananda's book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, when I ran across that book in 1970, 71, very early on in my search, I was left with the thought, after I finished reading the book, that either Paramahansa Yogananda was lying or he was telling the truth.
Yeah.
All right? And without any background in Indian Vedic thought or that kind of spirituality, except I knew it existed, I thought, he's telling the truth. And I had to put my judgments and my world perception on the shelf to accept it, because there was no way those two things could coexist. Well, that's the same way with you.
Well, I just can't imagine you doubting one word. I couldn't make up that stuff.
Oh, you know. And I know that. And yet, even with me, with decades of serious metaphysical, study. I mean, I've read a lot. I've been led. And when I found Betty Tatalajski at the Temple of Universality, it was an area that I myself had never explored. The area of phenomena, of mediumship, of talking with those you believe dead. I knew other people said it and could do it. But I want to tell you, friends, there's a qualitative difference when you run into people who, to them, it is a 24/7 reality, as it is with you, Betty.
Absolutely.
All right? And you know the difference between before you walked into that spiritualist church and later and before. You lived in the foothills of Tucson, the house, the swimming pool, the husband, the world that everybody thought if they had, they'd be happy. Yeah. And as you've said often at the temple, you were crying inside with a smile on your face. I mean, everybody would think that you were ungrateful to have all that stuff and not be happy.
So I looked around at my friends who were good Catholics, Baptists, as I had been, and I was. But so how can you spend so much time on your knees praying. Connecting with God, and with beautiful religious people, and still be miserable?
Inside, yes.
Inside.
Yes.
Inside.
Yes.
It wasn't about uncomfortable living or anything after, around me.
It wasn't for the want of things, and neither was it for the want of religious belief.
No.
But there was a hole that was asking to be filled.
And I often say, and because I know it's from me, that divine discontent is inside. You cannot stuff enough. You cannot stuff it full. You can only pour out from it. But who knew you have anything to pour out? I would have said I was inwardly bankrupt. I loved people, but that didn't do it either. You have to find something to give. You have to find something to give.
And that's what happened to this man.
Yeah.
As a young boy, in the middle of the war, he had volunteered to go to war.
He's 20 years old.
20 years old, and he goes back, and all of a sudden he's going to go to medical school, and he catches a cold.
He's thrilled. He's chosen. He's gonna go to medical school.
Yeah.
The Army's gonna pay for it.
Gonna let him go. He had turned them down because he volunteered to go to war. He's now at boot camp in basic training
in Texas,
and he finds out that because they know he's had this medical background, pre-med, and they're going to need a lot of doctors because of what they're gearing up for, that they're going to put him on the fast track and send him to medical school that he had just left because he was going to the Army. It was a miracle, and he knew it because he was on his way to go to war.
And they're going to pay for it. They're going to sponsor it, and then he gets to come back and be a doctor.
Yes, and it was going to be in 3 days, and he was so excited. And then he said he caught a cold.
The dust of Texas.
He said they were in the middle of it.
It wasn't a bullet, he said, that got me. It was
the dust of Texas. You couldn't see. But he thought, I'll just shake it off. I'm all right, And then what happened is that cold, in a period of 2.5 days, turned into virulent pneumonia. He was hoping he could make the train back. In fact, he lied about it, started walking there, and they put him back in bed, because he wasn't going to give up this chance. And truly what happened is, and he tells the story of what happened to him. And what did happen to him, he was just focused. This young man wanting to go back to medical school, he discovers that he's dead.
He's dead. He dies.
And he didn't know it.
No.
He was conscious. He was aware. This was some extraordinary thing that had happened to him. And he saw his body lying there with his ring. That's how he knew his body.
That's how he got back into it. But this was after what he thought was a couple of days.
Yes.
It was 10 minutes.
It was 10 minutes. He had this, what we now call an out-of-the-body experience. At the time that he had it,
he was dead.
I'm sure they didn't have a term out-of-the-body experience.
No.
I'm sure there weren't magazines every once in a while with somebody telling this extraordinary tale. He grew up in Virginia.
There was no such thing as NDE,
near-death nothing.
Experience, because he died.
Yes. And
he was in the morgue.
He was in the morgue. And as a part of that process, because he tells this extraordinary story that changed his life, that he was basically unable to tell almost anybody else in his life because of the rigidity of the society in which he grew up in, that he didn't want to be looked upon. He had tried to tell some people, they just backed away from it. And I think the first time he really told the full story was when, he told his wife, and she just, all right, I'll accept it. I love you, and I know things have happened. But that was sort of it. And then
now let's go to church.
let's go to church. But 10 years later, he decides that he's going to become a psychiatrist. Why?
He has to, because people keep getting sick.
That's what he said. He said, I fix them and they come back with another disease. I fix them, they come back with something else. There's no cure. So something in him said, listen, there's another cause that you can't see, and you should be a psychiatrist. So he goes, okay,
Then I can talk to them about their lives and how to
fix what's really going on with them. Yes. So this has got to be in the 50s, I think, by this time. Maybe early 60s. All right.
Because he has to go years through
school again. He's got to go through. He's got to do his residency. He's got to go back. He's got to give up this practice that he had that was paying this. He
really must be a superhuman person.
Yes. And he gave it up, and he thought, oh my God, they're gonna interview me before I go, and he knows the questions, and he knows that there's going to come up. He either tells the truth about this life-changing experience he had or not.
He couldn't talk about it. It had to be factual because he didn't know how to
gussy it up, sugarcoat. It just, all he knew is this happened to him.
How it happened.
So he was either going to have to lie or tell the truth. And he was sweating bullets because he was afraid if he told the Board of Psychiatry,
he'd lose the job.
He'd lose the job, and they said, "Listen, we love you. You're a great guy. You've done a lot. We've got some psychiatrists here. We want you to talk to."
He's been president of so many medical organizations.
And he was afraid that he was going to lose his credibility. And he said this. So there he goes. He's facing the bullet, and he thought, with all of his integrity on the line, he couldn't lie about it. So he's speaking to the head of the board. It was one-on-one, and he said, listen, there's something I have to tell you.
Right.
And he told this extraordinary story of what had happened to him before he became a doctor, when he had signed up to go to war, and this event had happened to him where he had actually seen himself, they pulled a sheet over his head, And he was there standing watching it. He was out of the body.
And
he didn't have a term for it.
And he had a terrible time trying to find himself in the morgue.
He was, you know those
They
dreams?
were all covered up.
Yeah. Well, the dreams that you have, you know, that you're lost, you know, and you're running, you're lost, and you're running.
Yeah.
He had that feeling. When you read the story, you know he had that feeling. He was trying to get back to where the train was. When he realized what had happened, something was wrong, he went back and he couldn't find himself till he found that ring and the sheet was pulled over his head. So he's telling, and there was all these things. He saw Jesus during this time. He was taken to the realms.
This was the major thing. When he saw this one that he thought was Jesus.
Yes.
Okay, because anytime you see anybody over there with a big light around them, you're going to think that's who it is. If you're fortunate, maybe it will be.
Yes.
But there are many saints
Yes.
and sages over there. But anyway, the question was, the thing that changed his life.
Yes. In the experience.
Was when he's trying to find his body and find that ring that's the only thing that can identify him. This great light around this person says to him, well, what have you done for me? That was it. What have you done for me?
The light did not come to him immediately. In fact, that light came to him after he went through fear.
After he took himself from Texas back over across to the coast and
frantic.
Back.
He was beside himself. I mean, he was dead, and, you know, but it was a traumatic experience.
He doesn't have a body.
And then he said this light came, and the only thing he could say about that light, there was so much love. There was so much love that he didn't want to leave it, come back, or do anything. All right? And it was love at a level that he had never felt, that he didn't know existed.
He just melted in the light.
Yes.
And the light said to him, what have you
done for me? And he goes, he freezes.
He's stricken.
Yeah. He goes,
He said,
well, I was an Eagle Scout.
Well, yes, you did that for you.
And
what have you done
for me? And what he realized, that love was asking him, that Jesus was asking him there, as he was there in this presence of this extraordinary unconditional love, was what he meant was, what have you done for me? Is how loving have you been? How much love have you given? This is what differentiates Christians. When Jesus said, by your acts they shall know thee, he didn't mean those who prayed out loud. In fact, in the Bible it says a lot about those who pray out loud. He didn't say, how many people have you converted? By this you will know me. How many followers have you run to me? He didn't say that at all. It's by your actions. And what he meant was
your
love.
Actions for other
people.
Love for
what have you done for other people?
So this light is asking him an audit.
Yeah.
So we love the book. I thought about a poem that Spirit gave me and that I appreciate, and it's called The Self-Audit. Let's celebrate the choices that each of us has made. Let's each of us take audit of the price that we've paid. Are my treasures laid up in the heaven of peace, or are they merely things I've purchased piece by piece? When my life on earth is over and I lay me down to rest, can I look myself in the eye and say, I've done my best? Did I finish my assignment here, do the things I came to do? Or did I lay my duty aside and leave it up to you? As I review my soul in earnest and do an audit of its worth, I vow again to apply myself to the purpose of my birth. I came to be a peacemaker, to bring love to this place. Help me, dear God, to be a blessing and help the human race.
There you have it, folks. It's audit time. Reverend Billy Tatalajski at 11 a.m. Temple of Universality, at the corner of Prince and Country Club.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Darryl.